Today we're going to talk about physical development and health for children birth to 3 years old. Some of the things that we'll be talking about in this video lecture are health and growth. They're both their physical growth and their physical development, and that includes motor ability, so your fine motor ability and your gross motor ability. So your fine motor ability is kind of your hands and your fingers and the ability to pick up things, move things, right? And then your gross motor ability is your large muscles. So your arms, how they move, the ability to walk, to crawl, to jump, that's your gross motor. So the first 3 years are a pivotal part of early development. What it is really is that there's a lot of rapid physical growth. So we know when during the period of conception that there's a lot of growth going from just a little blastocyst all the way, all those cells going into becoming a newborn baby. But then in the first 3 years of life, you're taking a newborn baby who might weigh 7 pounds, and at the end there'll be a 3 years old child who can run, jump, talk, eat, do all of these things. So there's a lot of physical growth, and they're growing a lot in their ability. So a newborn helpless baby, all the way into a 3-year-old who can jump, who can run, who can climb, who can go up and down hills. And the interesting thing about this is that it's a lot of times unmatched by cognitive reasoning and social ability. So our gross motor ability, like most mammals, is exponential. It's just growing constantly all of the time, especially for our youngest children. Socially and then cognitively, so their ability to think are typically unmatched. And that's why you get a lot of temper tantrums and things like that, because there's a discrepancy between what a child can do physically and what they can handle, what they can think about, and what they can handle socially. So we're going to talk about the physical parts, and then we'll talk about the other parts of development further weeks as well. So health and wellness. So when I got this job and I talked to my other boss who works in the county, that's where we do our early intervention for children with special needs, I was like, we work with children 0 to 3. What do you think the most important thing that a parent can do to set their child up for success? And her thing automatically was sleep. Far too often, people don't prioritize their own sleep and then their children's. And for many of you who are college students or in your early 20s, you can kind of get away with it. You're young and you're able, and you can take naps and things like that. But a lot of times when people become parents themselves, they don't have a good routine of sleeping and getting their 8 hours or 9 hours, 7 hours, whatever it is you need individually. And so then they don't prioritize it for infants to toddlers. And we grow when we sleep. So infants and toddlers, in order to grow and to be able to develop that physical ability, they need to sleep a lot. So that means that there's lots of naps and there's lots of sleep time as well. So they typically need between 11 and 12 hours at night, and then they need some kind of naps during the day. A very young infant is going to spend 20 hours of sleep, so a newborn's asleep 20 hours basically. And by the time they're 3, they're typically sleeping 11 to 12 hours a night and then taking a 2-hour nap during the day. So around 15 hours a day are sleeping. That's not an insignificant time of their life. So when people don't prioritize that, that can really have detrimental effects on people's development, their brain ability, and their physical development as well, because they're not growing if they're not sleeping. So it's really important that we set children up for success by letting them sleep and helping them regulate it, because they don't know how to regulate their own sleep. Children will just go, 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 go. So having a safe place to sleep, a crib or a toddler bed that has a firm mattress and not a lot of things on it, and then routine. So you're going to bed every night at 8 o'clock, you're waking up at 7, and then you take a nap from 12 to 2. That's an example of a toddler who really set schedule, and so they're not going to fight it as much because they know what's happening. We also want to model healthy behaviors ourselves. So eating a variety of foods, fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, milk, all the things that we know we should do. And we probably, this team, the spring semester, have probably made a whole bunch of New Year's resolutions about this. But we do, to the best of our ability, want to model eating really nutritious foods. And that intake is going to change a lot throughout the child's lifespan. So you'll notice a lot of times children can regulate themselves for the most part with their own food. They eat when they're hungry and they don't when they're not hungry, and that's fantastic because their caloric need is changing every day, and it's changing within development as well. So it's kind of unusual. Sometimes a 1.5-year-old needs to eat a lot of food, and you'll notice that your 3-year-old needs to eat less. And that can be pretty typical. If the 3-year-old is not working through a lot of physical development right now, if they've got the running, climbing, jumping, they need less calories than maybe a 1.5-year-old who needs to graze constantly because they're learning how to do all of those. And then children most likely just need to drink water. We don't want to get them in the habit of drinking juice, and especially not soda or milkshakes or anything like that on a regular basis. Water is the best. Juice is really not needed. It's just empty calories at that point. If you want them to eat fruit, then they should be eating an orange instead of drinking orange juice. And then milk really only needs to be offered twice a day. We're really lucky in this country. We have a lot of calcium-rich supplements. We have yogurt. We have cereal bars. We have a lot of things that have been enriched with calcium. So for most children, they really only need to have milk twice a day. Although you should, if you have concerns about calories or anything like that, you should talk to a registered dietitian because they have some that are specifically for children, or you should speak to your own doctor as well about the children and any kind of issues you're having with them as well. The interesting thing with our health and wellness is that, like the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about genetics and hereditary issues, that infants and toddlers really do inherit their height and their body type. But the healthy habits and really set them up, and that's what encourages their growth and development. So for example, Venus and Serena Williams are really tall women. I think Venus is like 6'1", 6'2", something like that. And they're both just incredibly strong people. And they most likely got that from their family history. But they're tennis powerhouses because I think they started playing tennis when they were 2 or 3 years old. That's the first time they got set up with lessons. And they were just constantly out on the courts. So they inherited a lot of great things like their height and stuff like that that makes them more apt to be good tennis players, but it's that constant practice. And then their father setting them up for success by having them take tennis lessons and prioritizing that physical development. That's what made them into the tennis superstars. I've talked a lot about doctors and how important doctor visits are. As a child goes older, we check their hearing and vision. A lot of times that's really important. At newborns always do that, but as they get older, it is as well. When I taught preschool, every year we had a doctor's office or a mobile clinic or somebody come in and do health and hearing and vision checks. And within like a class, if I had 20 to 40 students in my preschools, at least 5 came back with new hearing and vision issues. For some of them, for 2 children when I was teaching, it was about 10 years I was teaching, 2 of them actually showed a progressive vision issue. So 2 of those children were going to be blind by the time they were adults. And so we were able to link them in with blind services so that as they lost their vision, they were learning Braille and they were learning how to use canes and how to navigate the world for their eventual vision loss. So it's really important that we found that out at 2 years old so that we were able to prepare the family and the child for this eventual loss of vision. They also check for milestones and indicate possible delays. So they use a lot of different screenings and they look at developmental ranges, and then if there shows that there's an issue, the parent has an issue or the doctor has an issue with some developmental issues, which is usually like a written screening and then an interview with the doctor, then additional services and testing go through. I think I shared this previously, but my twins, when they were 1.5, I had some concerns about their speech. Knowing what I do, I just really was concerned that they only had 1 or 2 words and they should have a couple more 18 months old. And they just weren't using a lot of vocabulary regularly to get their needs met. They were using signs or grunting and stuff like that. The pediatrician concurred and we were able to get them first 5 services. They have a lot of commercials on the TV or on the back of buses just talking about all the services that they have that are free through the county or the state. We did a little baby class and we learned a bunch of great ways to encourage that vocabulary. At the end of that, one of them went for more additional speech services. We realized she was having some articulation issues, so she couldn't say like a lot of different sounds, S's, R's, T's, a lot of different things like that. And so we got her into speech therapy, and she actually just finished this year in kindergarten, and she's making all of her sounds. So that's an example of how easy it is to kind of be linked in with this. But when I'm talking about milestones, I just want to we'll touch on them, and this is kind of what this whole class is going over milestones that you might expect in each age in order to understand children as a whole. Either for some of you who are parents yourselves, you want to go into education. This is just an introductory class on what children do and what their milestones are that they should roughly be achieving at each age. But the interesting thing about this is it's very, very variable. So for example, I have this thing on the screen where a child might start walking at 9 months, or they might start walking at 15. And both are valid and both are considered typical, and that's quite a large range of months. I was at the pool and I ran into one of my friends, and she puts her 9.5 month down, and he just toddles off. And I was like, oh my God, he's walking so early. You are going to be so busy. This is your second child, and he's walking so early. But it was totally great. It was typical. That's who he is. He was a fast runner. He's probably going to be Olympian. He's just very, very physically inclined. But then one of my twins was 15 months old, and she started taking walks, but they were really lazy walks, and she's just never been that physically inclined. We've always been searching for that right sport for her. It wasn't soccer. It's probably not skateboarding. You know, she's just much more of a sit on the couch and read a book type child. I want to encourage her physical ability, so I'm still on the hunt for a sport that she might enjoy a couple hours a week. So if you guys have any hints for me on things that non-physical older children enjoy, please shoot me an email or let me know in the discussion posts. But an infant not walking around 18 months might indicate that there's an issue with gross motor development. So we kind of have this range where early is okay, but at a certain point, so if they're not sitting up by 12 months, if they're not crawling by 12 months, or they're not walking around 18 months, that's typically when we refer out for services, so that we can kind of get an idea of why the child might not be crawling, and then get them appropriate services. Nutrition. So I talked a little bit about this before, but in the very first year, breastfeeding and formula feeding are the best. I breastfed one of my children, and then with my twins, they were formula fed, so I've done both. They both gained weight appropriately, and that's the most important thing, is that a child has regular liquid nutrition throughout their first year that meets their caloric needs. So breastfeeding and formula feeding has a lot of fat and it has a lot of calories, which is really, really important for growing children who need to develop those rolls, and they need to start getting nice and chunky so they can shoot up and they can grow really well. Around 6 months is when you give a puree or a purees. So, you know, it's like Gerber baby food or those little pouches, or you can make it yourself in a blender, which is what I did. And that's just to get a taste on it. We typically recommend 6 months old. That's when a child can sit up on their own, and so that they can start to swallow things, and orally they are equipped to handle it. And then also 6 months is when your gut and your stomach are able to handle more solid foods as well. A pediatrician might have you do it a little bit earlier, and that really depends on the medical advice that you're getting from your own personal practitioner. But most times purees are not started until 6 months, and then finger foods and beans and chicken and little crackers and stuff like that that melt in your mouth are typically done around 9 months, and then a year you're able to eat a lot more variety. We're just making sure that we introduce foods that are nutritionally dense, so fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, calcium-rich foods as well are really the best bet. We want to make sure that we're giving children the most nutritionally varied diet that they will take. Toddlers are notorious for being really picky eaters, and that's okay. You just keep trying. You don't really make a big deal out of it, at least in my case, and I think it's just important that you continue to offer really healthy choices so that the child knows that this is typical. A typical meal involves a vegetable and a fruit and a glass of milk, you know, and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So it's not involved, but they understand what makes up a healthy meal, because for many of us that will help us in adulthood as well. But they know what nutritious meals look like. We also want to introduce foods that require a fork and a spoon, so that they can start to be able to use not just only their fingers and this kind of ability to pick up, but to use a fork and a spoon and bring it to your mouth. That's also a gross motor skill. It's a fine motor skill, the ability to feed yourself by using your fingers. I do want to talk about SIDS and safe sleep, since we're talking about all these wellness issues. The leading cause of death for a child under the age of 1 is SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. We don't know why it happens, but we know there's a combination of factors. There might be a biological issue, and then there are some identified risk factors that we combat by having a child sleep on their back. So once we did this back to sleep campaign, 50% the SIDS rate dropped by 50%. So that's half. So we know it has something to do with sleeping on your back. In a crib or the bed where the child sleeps, there should be no pillows, no bumpers, no blankets, no stuffed animals, and the the mattress should be fairly firm as well. Recently, in the last couple of years, they've come up with this idea that the room should also have a fan on, like a ceiling fan or a little box fan on a dresser, something like that, just to keep the air moving. I think it might also have something to do with carbon dioxide as well. We do know that there are other risks, and these are more within the family, so familial risks. One of them is domestic violence. So if there's any kind of violence in the home from any partner, it's really important that the child does not sleep in the parent's bed. If any of the parents smoke cigarettes, smoke marijuana, or drink even a glass of wine, the child should also not be in the bed as well. And if there's multiple people, so multiple siblings, multiple partners, a huge extended family, everybody shouldn't be in the same bed. We try to minimize the amount of people in a bed in order to give the child the most space. And then an infant under the age of 11 weeks as well should probably have their own space as well. A little co-sleeper, which is like a little baby bed, baby crib that attaches to the side of a person's bed, or a pack and play in their room, something like that. Probably is a little bit more safe than bed sharing, but there are some definite risks that people should look at if they are choosing to share a bed with a child. We also know that it affects certain populations as well. African Americans, Native Americans, teen mothers, and those who receive no prenatal care are more common to have a SIDS-related death as well, and that's probably having to do with some kind of disparity in healthcare access, or it could also be a biological factor. This is something that's being researched further. We just know that we should set children up for success by having them sleep on their back. Immunizations. So right now, as of 2016, immunizations are required in childcare in California. So if you're going to have your child go into the public school, or they're going to go into any child care center, so a daycare or anything like that in California, they do need to have their immunizations. They aren't going to get their immunizations. They need to have a doctor sign why they are not getting it. The most important thing that I want to talk about when talking about immunizations is that they do not cause autism. There's this idea floating around in a lot of times online that they cause autism. There was a study done in the early 2000s by a man called Andrew Wakefield, who was a doctor at the time, and he interviewed 12 kids at one of his children's birthday parties, and he wrote a whole paper about it, and he decided from those findings of 12 children that immunizations cause autism. It's 100% not true. That article was taken out of the books. He is no longer a doctor. He's been disbarred. He is no longer allowed to practice medicine. Because immunizations do not cause autism. I have worked in the field with children for 18 years, and I've worked with lots of children with autism. I've never met a child whose autism is caused by immunization. So it is really important that we do immunize our children. There's this idea of herd immunity. And what herd immunity is that it is this idea that if the entire herd of animals, or in this case people who are animals, we're mammals too, if most of us are immunized, we will protect the most vulnerable among us. And those are very young children who haven't had the chance to get immunized. They're very old people who can't receive them because they're very old, or it won't work as well, or it's children who are very, very sick. So I work with children with special needs, and some of them have had heart attacks, either because of the syndrome that they have, or their development is delayed because they've spent 6 months in the hospital recovering from having open heart surgery at 4 months old. So these are very, very significantly sick children. And I take a lot of precautions when I go into their home and work on them to make sure that I'm healthy and I'm not bringing any germs to the house. Part of this is as well is that they are on a delayed schedule for getting their vaccinations in order to make sure that they are not being exposed to anything they shouldn't be. So I'm talking, these are children who can't go to parks, who can't go to grocery stores with their parents, who don't go to parties, older siblings don't go to parties, all of these things in order to minimize their risk because they are recovering from really significant health challenges, like I said, with open heart surgery. So it's really important that we as a whole, as a society, get immunizations that don't hurt us in order to protect the most vulnerable populations. I do want to talk on hepatitis A and the whooping cough. So hepatitis A has been recently in the news because it was epidemic here in San Diego County. When I wrote this, 14 were dead, and now it's over 20, and it's no longer over 100 that were infected. And I just wrote this a couple months ago, so I'm going to change it again. I think over 200 people have been infected. Oceanside, where I live, and then downtown San Diego, some where I work, have been very hard hit by this pandemic. So vaccines are available if you're homeless or you work closely with homeless populations, or foster care populations, ideal. And then just more importantly, that we take all of our hand washing precautions, specifically when we're outdoors or if we're using public bathrooms and things like that, that we're keeping ourselves clean, because it's highly contagious from like spit or sharing food or anything like that. You can get hepatitis A, and you can die from it, like having a really, really bad. And then whooping cough, the last infant who died was in July of 2015. It was a newborn who could not be vaccinated. And so that child died when they were exposed to it by somebody who would have it. Oceanside, once again, where I live, my daughter's elementary school, at least once a year, we get a letter home saying that somebody had it. And then South Bend, San Diego, National City, Chula Vista, and Cajon, where I used to work, have been regularly affected. And I was exposed to it in 2014 down there. By a child who had it and we didn't know for a while. So when I was pregnant, I got my whooping cough vaccination. So did my husband, my parents as well, to protect our youngest and our twins when they were born, to make sure that everybody was safe. So it's very important that we try to keep ourselves safe. So for those children that cannot because they're too young. So growth and development, we're going to talk about cephalocaudal principle. So this is kind of what I was talking about, getting your child a nutritious, healthy diet, and when they're younger, that they need more calories and fat, even if you formula or breast milk. That's because of this cephalocaudal principle and proxima distal. And what that means is they grow center out, so they're developing all those rolls and the little gut and the little belly and like the double chins and all that type of stuff, and then they shoot up. So it's out first, and then it's up. And so that's how children develop. And if you've ever kind of seen a little toddler, you'll like look at them and you'll be like, man, that kid has a hair gut. And then all of a sudden, like a week later, they don't fit any of their pants anymore because they've just shot up and all of their genes are now like. So it's typically what parents or people that are close with toddlers kind of see, is that they grow center out and then they go up. And then we also kind of have this principle that we're out of proportion with our body. And that's why I chose this adorable little girl, because she is a good description of the baby's head's being very big. So it's not in proportion with her body. It's much bigger than the rest of her body. And as we grow, it evens out, and our head will continue to grow, but our body will grow faster, and then it will be more in proportion or more proportional to what we expect to. So I want to touch on motor development. So we have gross motor development. So for this age, it's crawling, running, swinging, walking, riding tricycles, going up and down stairs, climbing up up and over walls, swinging on jungle gyms, all that type of stuff. And then fine motor is kind of your little fingers and stuff like that. So the ability to draw, to thread a bead, to cut, to stack blocks, and to feed yourself. So gross motor is all of these. It's your big movements. It's being able to crawl and run and jump and all that type of stuff. And fine motor is being able to use it. They are interrelated and they're totally dependent on each other. So like your ability to draw is impacted by shoulder and core strength. So if you have terrible handwriting, a doctor you know has terrible handwriting, or a child in your life has terrible handwriting, the best thing to do actually is to get them to go to the playground and do monkey bars. So being able to swing like that is really going to strengthen this and your grip strength, and that's really important for being able to read. Or wheelbarrows, you know that game where you put your hands on the floor and somebody holds your feet or your hips and you try to go as fast as you can on your hands. That's also really, really good for handwriting as well, because we need that shoulder, we need that core strength in order to be able to move our hands appropriately and write better. So in the following slides, I'm going to go over what it looks like the first 3 years of physical development. This is an online class, although you should be working on your observations. So you're going to be observing a child at either an infant or a toddler, a middle school, toddler, something, teenager, something like that. You're going to do 2 observations of a child, 2 observations of 2 different children. This is a very kind of online theoretical class, so I'm going to show you a lot of different pictures of what children are looking like and what they are able to do. So in the first 3 months, we're introducing tummy time. So soon after coming home from the hospital, they should be put on their tummy. Since we now do SIDS as the safest way to sleep, they don't get a lot of time to work on their neck control and their shoulder control and that gross motor ability by being tummy down. So we want them to be able to lift their head, and we use their arms and elbows and be able to push up when they're on their stomach. If they are on their back playing, we want them to be able to kick their legs, bat at things, grab things in the activity gym. That little boy is kind of sitting under an activity gym and he's smiling. He has a towel rolled up underneath his chest in order to encourage him to stay in tummy time and to like it a little bit more, but he should be able to bat at toys. Maybe not grab them yet. They're just kind of batting down their back. They should also be able to hold a rattle or your finger. That's their fine motor ability. This young is the ability to, if something's put in their hand, they will grab onto it. At 3 to 6 months old, we should have a child rolling over. That's what that little one down in the corner is doing. She's getting ready to roll over. So that means that she has a lot of head and neck control, and she's been doing a lot of time. The mom and the baby in the top picture, she's supporting her, but if the child is has their legs on the ground and they're able to support a lot of their body weight, and mom is just there for balance and support. And she has really good increased head control as well. She's not a little, like 2-month-old who's got kind of a bobbly head that can't keep it up. You've got really increased head control and you can keep yourself steady. And they'll be able to reach out for toys with purpose and with more motor control. So they'll be able to grab things and maybe bring it to their mouth. 6 to 9 months, you see I got a bunch of little kids in this top picture. They're sitting around because they can now sit up by themselves. They should have increased time in his tummy as they're working to get into the crawl position, so they're getting up on all fours. And then maybe from all fours, they're going back to their stomach, or maybe they're going up again, and then they're going back to the same position. So they're a lot more mobile, and they have the ability to get from the floor up into sitting, and then from sitting back into the crawling position. They should be interested in being mobile and reaching for toys and objects. They don't want to just be sedentary in one spot. They want to be with action. It's probably with their family. Like the little boy in the bottom picture, they want to be able to go grasp onto toys, find toys, and they're also working on being able to slap their hands or bang 2 toys together as well. 9 to 12 months, they're crawling. That little boy in the bottom, he's crawling. The boy in the left-hand picture has pulled to stand on a coffee table. And then the one in the very top picture on the left-hand side is picking up pieces of food and bringing them to his mouth. At 12 to 18 months old, we're working on our walking skills. And once they're walking, they can pick up a toy from the ground and they can recover back to standing. I know that doesn't sound like much, but that's really kind of a difficult task. You have to have a lot of strength in your legs and in your core in order to do that, and you have to have balance. You're going to climb up the stairs by crawling, and because using the railing and your hands to go up is going to be more difficult. They'll start scribbling on paper with their whole fist and like a chubby crayon, and then they can also isolate their index finger in order to start to pop bubbles as well. And then the 2 big blocks, like the 2 wooden old school blocks, they should be able to stack one on top of another. Those are all the types of gross, fine motor, and gross motor abilities that we're working on. 18 to 24 months old, so this is 1.5 to 2 years, 18 months to 24 months. This is 1.5 to 2 years old. They're walking and they're running, so they can turn a little bit. They can avoid obstacles. So if there's a giant rock in their way, they're going to be able to go around it. Maybe not very fast, but they can make their way around it. They can sit on a tricycle by their time there too, and they're working on pushing their feet on the ground. So they can't quite use those pedals, but they can push by sitting on the tricycle, putting their feet on the ground and pushing. They have a little bit more control with scribbling. They're still probably going like this, but they don't need a giant crayon anymore. They're turning pages in a board book and maybe stacking a few more blocks like this child is on the very top picture. And then the most fun with stacking blocks is being able to crash them. So then 24 months to 36 months, so that's 2 years old to 3 years old, you should be running with more increased ability and speed. You should be able to jump with both of your feet off the ground and maybe even balance with one foot. You should be able to push pedals on a tricycle, go up and down the stairs independently, either holding onto the railing, but you're alternating your feet. You should be able to thread beads, so you have giant beads and you can put like a shoelace through. Stack large towers of blocks that are getting smaller and smaller. Should be able to paste, and we're learning how to cut. Not very well at 3 years old, but you might be able to snip around the edge of the paper and then do a really rough cut through a piece of construction paper. You should be able to feed yourselves and wash your hands, brush your hands, brush your teeth partially. I wouldn't ever trust a 2 and 3 year old to wash their teeth by themselves and do a good job, or to wash their hands. They probably wouldn't use enough soap or do it for 20 seconds, but they know the gist of the process of doing those types of things, and they should also be working on being toilet trained by 3 years. So what can we do to encourage physical development for children who are 0 to 3 years old? For our infants, it's really important that they're on a blanket on the ground, and a tummy time is really, really important so that they can start to work on that head control and neck control. They should have some things to play with, and typically what they want is a human nearby. So infants are typically really easy. You can kind of cart them around anywhere. If I was folding laundry, then I would have my infant near me, playing on their tummy or trying to crawl around, that type of stuff. We want to limit the amount of time in strollers, bumbos, swings, or exercisers. We want them to be able to use their physical ability. You need to be able to do that, being able to roll around, crawl around. If you're in a bumbo, which is that little plastic thing that you can stick a baby in, or a swing that moves you, or an exerciser or a stroller a lot of the time, so for a significant amount of the day, then that means that you're not working on your physical development. You're not working on crawling or walking or tummy time because you're in something. So we want to limit the amount of time. If you need a 15-minute shower, sure, stick them in an exerciser. That's a little jumpy thing you can jump in. But more time should be spent actively exploring your environment. Same with mobile infants. We need space to roll, to crawl, to pull up that is safe and interactive. They mouth toys at this age. They put everything in their mouth, and that's totally okay. It just means that we need to make sure that there are safe toys around. And it's hard. When my baby was born, my twins were 5, and so she had many a Lego stuck in her mouth. And just trying to keep her away from the Legos as much as I could and make sure that she had her own toys. And then if she put it in her mouth, that was fine. I could just clean it later and then give it back to her. But she had a lot of space around the house to roll, to crawl, and to pull up. And then for young toddlers, safe spaces for early walking and moving. Those sharp corners on the side of a fireplace or something like that is padded, or a blanket's put over it. And lots of chances to go on a walk or go to the park to work on like the wood chips or sand or grass, stairs, slides, anything that's new and different that they can start to move around and start to interact with will help them be really strong walkers. Play and just the ability to actively explore your environment is really, really important. And as they're older, heading into 3 years old, learning the safety rules by holding their hand in the street, not touching an oven that's hot, things like that, learning from their parents how to do that. So the biggest thing that we can do is just sit on the ground and play with our kids. So right now, you could be watching the Real Housewives or the Olympics or anything that's on TV while also playing with your child. So you can be sitting on the ground and you can be stacking large blocks or teaching them how to cut. We want to engage with them throughout the day and then help them with routines as well. So making sure that they're getting enough sleep and they're getting their good diet so that they can grow and they can physically develop. The American Academy of Pediatrics says no iPad or TV for ages 0 to 1. So when they're infants, we want them to interact, we want them to look in our face, and we want them to play with us. And then it's limited up until age 3. Some of the families that I work with that have children with special needs will do a little time on it where we'll go through their days and see what's going on, so we can find like 10, 15 minutes a day where you can practice some of these early intervention skills with your child. And through talking with these families, I'll find out that between 5 to 7 hours a day, a 2-year-old might be having screen time, either through a TV, iPads, apps on a phone, Angry Birds, that type of stuff. And that's a significant amount of time that a child is spending looking at a screen like you're doing right now, except it's not interacting. So I'm talking to you and I'm trying to be a little bit interactive, but you're not talking back to me, you're just sitting there. So how does that impact a child's development if for a significant amount of the time when they should be running, jumping, and exploring their world, they're just sitting there statically looking at us? Does that help children develop? Something we're still researching, but I would probably say no. It's a part of our modern life. I'm not saying, throw your iPhone away as soon as you get pregnant, but in the first couple of years, let's limit it so that we can really focus on play. So in conclusion, this is a time of rapid physical growth, both in your ability to use your gross motor ability, so your arms and crawling and running and jumping, and your fine motor ability, pick things up, thread beads, stack blocks, and then in how your body just grows physically and how healthy you are. So if we can set up healthy habits from birth, sleeping, lots of really good sleep in a very predictable routine, lots of play and exploration, and then really a nice, healthy, varied diet, that's all going to help them help you to help them to contribute to having quality growth and development. Thanks so much for watching this, and I will see you guys next week. We'll be talking about more issues with children birth to age 3 years old.